However, I grasp the nettle and try to sum up and then submit my own observations. As you have heard, members of the panel have traversed a whole range of questions and issues regarding the blasphemy law and the issue of blasphemy. And as the doctors of law on the panel have taken us through how the blasphemy laws were introduced during the colonial times, and then how they were amended here, and what were the sociological origins of those things. One thing that particularly intrigues me, and I think I would tend to subscribe to that, is that once you create a law, then that law marks as an identifier of issues. So anybody who wants to use that law for their own nefarious ends or for their good ends knows what exact complaints have to be lodged against a certain person he doesn't like, whether genuinely or otherwise. So thereby, the energies of the complainants are focused and channeled through that filter, which is what has happened here. But intriguingly, in the Islamic world, in the 15th centuries, as my friend has mentioned, according to one cleric, only 100 cases were ever brought before the courts of law. Which means practically the Islamic world during the 1500 years did not need a law. Then in Pakistan also there was no specific blasphemy law until General Ziaul Haq, and the society went along very well without that. Now how is it? Now there I would disagree with some of my friends and would submit that blasphemy itself has never been in question in Islam or among the Muslims. It is an article of faith, and we are not dealing here with the arguments of the doctors of law which have come forth from time to time, but the perceptions of the masses of Muslims. Now, therefore, the Muslims have always believed that the person of Holy Prophet Muhammad is sacrosanct and should be maintained. Now, having said that, the civil society itself created conditions in which nobody could ever dare to insult the Prophet, whether they were Muslims or religious minorities. Religious minorities, in any case, are never in a position to offend the majority in such cases. Therefore, things went very well. Now here, I'm reminded of Tariq Ali, who talks of a case in Moorish Spain. There, a Jew was brought before the Qazi, and it was alleged that he had blasphemed. The Qazi just brushed it aside and said, he is a lunatic, take him away. But that Jew was an evangelist in his own way, and he persisted. It was then that the Qazi had to take action. Now, in my own time, in my town, Sialkot, there was a guy who thought that he was the Prophet of Allah. Everybody ridiculed him and just dismissed him. Now, why did it happen? Why this attitude was there then and it is not now? The answer is this. Since the civil society, when it is stable and prosperous, does not dabble with such matters. It is only when the space for individuals and classes and subgroups to live honorably, prosperously, safely shrinks. It is only then that people start to think about these things. Now there is another crunch here. The crunch is that it is wrong to lay all the blame on the laws of Pakistan or General Ziaul Haq. The fact of the matter is that the elite of Pakistan is thoroughly corrupt. They have brought Pakistan to such a mess. And it is not only the elite of Pakistan, it is the elite of the Muslim communities anywhere in the world. Whether they are monarchical or despotic regimes. And when the people in those communities find that they are not even getting what should get to them through the filtered down distribution of wealth, then they resent. Now this resentment needs an outlet, and that outlet has to be formulated. One of the formulations that the masses always take recourse to is revivalism, especially in the case of Muslims who have had a glorious past. Some of it was imagined, the other was real. Therefore, revivalism finds a ready filter to them for expressing their resentment. Now, this religious intolerance, not only in Pakistan but throughout the Muslim world, gets reflected not only through liberal ideologies but through religious ideologies. Now, therefore, the world of Islam, especially Pakistan, are faced with that challenge. I cannot subscribe to the religious ideology as a possible solution to the Muslims' ills. But I cannot ignore the fact that the resentment behind all this religious intolerance is not against religion itself or against the people among them whom they live, but it is against the elite who have brought them to such a pass. Therefore, if at all, you have to decide how to calm the nerves of the Muslim masses. You have to find some lasting solutions. Now, my own submission is that in the case of Pakistan and other Muslim communities, you have to have a fairer and more just system of distribution, creation of wealth, and then distribution of wealth. I am not prescribing any Marxist formulas. I am not asking you to take up capitalism or embrace socialism. I am only asking you to become modernists. I would submit here that the only terms in which the debate, intellectual debate, should be carried out is in the terms of modernizers and conservatives. Status quo is not in terms of secularists, liberals on the one hand, and the religious people on the other, because that confuses the issue. The issue is that those who want to change society are modernizers, and they are modernizers not in terms of state policy and strategy, but also in terms of their religious practice. Now, two great modernizers the Islamic world in India have seen. One was Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, who was asked what the punishment of the blasphemy was. And he first chided the questioner, but then when he was forced to give a forthright answer, said only the state has a right to decide. Now, the great Maulana, thereby got rid of his own responsibility, and he thought that probably there would not be no Islamic state. The other great humanizer and modernizer was Iqbal. Now, one of the doctors here mentioned that the Quran is not a code. Actually, Iqbal in his Madras lectures said exactly the same words. he said the Quran is not a code. And he also said that in the Quran there are certain verses which has to do something with the executive decisions. The rest of it is a set of guiding principles. Now, if you look at the question of blasphemy, there is no doubt that there are two parallel traditions in Islam on the question of compassion and blasphemy. One is the behavior of the Holy Prophet in Taif, compassion as an individual. On the other hand, when he became the ruler of a state, it could be argued, and I'm not sure whether my argument is valid, but I just submit that for your consideration. When the Prophet Muhammad was founding a modern state in Medina, any attack on his personal integrity or person could be interpreted as an act of treason. Therefore, there could be a punishment, a dire punishment in that regard. Now, would that be valid today or not? This is a question. That punishment would be valid or not is a question. The point is that once you decide that a state is a mediator between individuals and an offender and the prosecution, then you surrender the right of an individual to decide how he should implement the law or take that punishment. Then it becomes the responsibility of the state itself. Now, those who oppose the implementation of blasphemy law and say that every individual has a right to take the law in his hands is actually trying to sail in two boats. He is, on the one hand, he wants the state to decide. On the other hand, he wants an individual to take the law in his own hand. Now, this is untenable. Now, having said that, I would ask you another question.
Sure.
The question is, when a blasphemy law was introduced and therefore implemented in Pakistan, who made that? That law was made by a parliament or human beings. That law, the opposition to that law is not the opposition to the subject of that law. The subject of the law is blasphemy. Now, anybody who is criticizing the law is not saying that blasphemy should be repealed or should be ignored. No, he is saying that the way blasphemy is being dealt with in this particular law needs to be reformed, repealed, changed, or whatever. Therefore, I would submit that, having said all this, we should realize that this debate is not only confined to blasphemy law. We have created a certain condition, environment in Pakistan, which every debate is bound to be discussed in such intolerant terms. And that is the basic problem. Now, when somebody suggests certain amendments or reforms in the law, I'm all for it. But remember, we are in for great trouble and for a very, very long time. If wishes were horses, then all Pakistan would have been a prosperous state. It never is, and probably will never be for a very long time, because we as social groups have taken a suicide path. And I have seen from my own experience in history that social groups never stop midstream. They go long and headlong, and sometimes they face